Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Jenny Beal, and this is the Awareness podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Anne Hay to talk about her journey towards living in not knowing. Anne is a writer and a poet, and she lives in Edinburgh, Scotland. So as usual, I'll start by telling you a little bit about Anne's background. As a child, Anne loved stories, myths, and fairy tales. After watching the film Lost Horizon in her early teens, Anne decided that the peace and happiness of Shangri-La was what she wanted. When she was 19, she was followed in a dark street, pushed against a wall and sexually assaulted, during which her awareness soared beyond her physical body, and she experienced a deep peace and lack of fear. The experiential knowledge of something beyond consensuous reality remained after that encounter, despite her having no words to describe it. Over the years, there were more such glimpses, such as during childbirth and the death of both of her parents. In her 30s, she joined a school of Advaita Vedanta in Edinburgh, where practice included meditation, selfless service, and surrendering the fruits of action. After 12 years, she left the school and joined the TM movement. But after a few years, she recognized that spiritual organizations were not for her. And she set up a Socrates cafe in Edinburgh, which encouraged listening, questioning, and empathy in the examination of topics chosen by the group. In 2018, following cancer treatment, she reached another crossroads in her life. A therapist she knew introduced her to the teachings of Rupert Spira, where she began to find the freedom and joy she'd always sought. Then, during the COVID pandemic, she discovered Francis Lucille's online satsangs. After the first online meditation session, she knew that after a lifelong search, she had come home. So, going back to your teenage years, and that film Lost Horizon must somehow have pointed to something that you knew existed. You existed maybe within yourself, maybe not. A place of peace, harmony. Can you say something more about that?
Yes, I was lucky to have a father who had similarly an experience of coming close to death when he was 18, and it was after a parachute jump. So he was very keen on showing me how to be peaceful. And not all children, and certainly me, I was not always willing to do this. So he took me out onto a loch in Scotland, and without a book, which was absolutely terrible for me, and said, listen to the birds, look how peaceful it is. I think, right. But then, given that you can't do anything else, you eventually do discover that it is beautiful to watch the water and listen to curlews. Yeah. So I was lucky to have a father like that. So yeah. I was very interested in the film. And the bit that really sticks out for me was when the Dalai Lama was talking to somebody who had, in the film, there's a car crash. So people land up in Shangri-La and they haven't planned it. They just find themselves there in this community. But there's one person, the lead character, who's really quite taken and interested, and he has a chat to the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama says to them, look at that airplane there. You see its shadow goes up and down over the hills. But the airplane just goes straight across. And that image stayed it stayed with me for the whole of my life. I thought that sounds good.
Yes. It was an early glimpse of something beyond the ordinary. And yes. So that traumatic time when you were raped, what was it that experience told you? And was there any connection with that shadow of the aeroplane and the aeroplane itself?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I was raped. I mean, if you come out of your body, it's impossible to tell. But I think there would have been some. Yeah, I don't think so. I think what happened was, I was out on my own. I thought I was being followed. I started to run. The man started to run. I thought, oh, I'm not imagining this. And I did the horror movie thing where you run into a dead end. And I thought, that's it. I'm done for. And he put me against the wall. And I can't remember if his hand was there but anyway, I do remember thinking, I will do anything to wake up tomorrow. And then I just soared out of my body, right, and as I can remember it, into the sky, although memory plays strange tricks. And I think the mind makes a sense and maybe a scenario out of things that are indescribable. And then I would look down and I saw this young girl who was 19 and thought, this is a shame. But it was a sense of detachment. There was no fear at that moment. I was completely peaceful. Obviously, that did not last. I came very quickly back to my body, surge of adrenaline, and I ran. I injured myself very badly. So I was walking home. I was bleeding. I was probably crying. And then I walked through a park and there was sonne lumière. There was beautiful classical music and colored lights. And I was just thinking, this is so beautiful. And the world is both terrifying and beautiful. So I hardly slept that night. I couldn't, I didn't know how to make sense of it. I was a long way from home. I was in the south of France and I lived in Scotland. Wow. So, yes, it was the defining episode of my life, I think, in a number of ways.
How did that affect your life after the event when you got back to Scotland, to your old life?
Well, it was funny. Not immediately. I was back in the bosom of my family, and I didn't really discuss it much. My mother was very upset at various things that happened during my opiates. So I didn't really want to. I didn't have words. I mean, I didn't know what an out of body experience was. I just got on with life. But at the back, I two things I realized. One, life is so short. It can be so short. And that, when I was told I had cancer, it was just, I had this thought, wow, that was very quick. And I was 64 at the time. And I thought, 64 years, that went like that. So one, life is very short. And two, there's much more to it than anybody's telling me.
And then much later, you joined Navita Vedanta School in Edinburgh, and you studied with them for quite a while. What were you looking for when you joined that school?
I can still remember the advert. It said things like, for thoughtful men and women seeking an understanding of the world in which they live. And it drew on the great philosophical traditions of East and West. And I thought, this is basically Shangri-La plus Western philosophy. This is going to give me everything I've ever thought, And I was young, and I had a young family, and they were, and basically it was a night away from the family. So anything, I'm, happy to do anything to, be relieved of domesticity for a night, and somebody else was putting the children to bed. So, and I met some great people, but the first evening we did a meditation exercise. It was a very embodied exercise it was called The Exercise. It's not a difficult name to remember, but you would just simply sit in your chair, feet on the floor. You'd feel your arms on the table or whatever. Feel the air and face in your hands, and let your listening run out to the furthest and quietest sound, and rest in that. And at that moment, I thought, what I experienced was, this is it. I recognize this. And I told, they said, well, feedback. And I said, oh, yes, it was lovely. And I'd forgotten this was available. And the tutor said, yeah, that's how it is. And I thought, yeah, he knows. People here know about things. So we were a Scottish outpost. I mean, there's been a lot written and said about the School of Philosophy and School of Economic Science, which I don't want to go into. But my experience, certainly for the first few years, it was an outpost in Edinburgh, and the man in charge had a similar relationship that Nicola Sturgeon does to the UK government. So suffice it to say, he didn't do everything he was told, and he didn't follow everything that happened down there, as we called it, to our advantage. So I was very happy. We made great friends. We had great discussions, which we continued in a pub afterwards till 11:30 sometimes. But to cut a long story short, as I did more and more, took on more roles in the school, I decided it was not for me. There was something missing.
Mm. And then you joined the TM movement. That was presumably because for you meditation was important.
Yes. I thought meditate, and I still think meditation is the key. Yes, of course, you need the understanding as well. But things happen in the meditation that are transformative.
Yeah.
I think you call them numinal experiences. I didn't want to lose that. I wanted some connection with people who talked about these matters.
Yeah. But still, something was missing, obviously, because you then left that organisation too. You weren't completely satisfied. What was it that was missing?
Well, I mean, I liked fairy tales. I mean, to go back to Goldilocks, I think the school was too tight, and for me, and the TM was too loose. There was a lot of joy and freedom in TM, and there was more structure in the school. So what I really wanted was a combination of both, and I had a great time there, learning yogic bouncing, I call it. It was enormous fun. It's not a skill that is essential for daily life, but it was fun when it lasted.
Sounds a little bit painful, really.
Not at all. They had padded mattresses,
right?
And it was very similar, because you had this time out of time. And of course, when you came back down to earth, that's when you think, oh, what just happened there?
Yeah.
That's interesting. And the group were very funny. We had a lot of laughs. And that is really important. It's so important to laugh because this is too serious to be taken seriously.
Yes, yes. So you left the TM movement, and then you set up a Socrates cafe in Edinburgh. Can you explain briefly what that was about?
Well, we'd studied Socrates and Plato at the School of Philosophy. So, and I was really taken with Socrates. I thought he was similar to Christ, and this whole idea of not knowing. I mean, he famously said, "The wise man is, or woman, is he who knows he doesn't know."
Yes.
And that was quite a hard sell, not knowing, I have to say. I found it, of all places, in Las Vegas. We were traveling through America. And I saw in a bookshop in Las Vegas a flyer for Socrates Cafe. I thought, that looks really good, and I couldn't go. So when I came back to Edinburgh, I looked up the website, and there was a whole template that you could use. So we would have a long period of choosing questions and a long process. So that was a reflective time because everyone put in a question and then we had to vote. It was 3 rounds of voting to decide what question it was. And then, I know it sounds convoluted, but it was part of the process of unpacking the question in your head. And then we would interrogate the question, were there any embedded assumptions or biases in the question? And then it was really about questioning, really questioning other people. What's your view of this? Listening to their answers with empathy. In other words, not listening to the answer with the view of waiting for a space so that you could get your tuppence worth in, but actually listening and questioning yourself and questioning your own beliefs. So it could be quite profound. Yeah, yes.
Did you find it talking to other people with different ideas changed your views about things?
Yes, every time, yeah. Every single time. And other people said that as well.
Yeah. I wonder whether it was a reaction against the fairly fixed ideas of the previous spiritual organizations that you belong to.
That's
kind of spirit
yes,
of openness.
That's possible. I think, yes, I mean, one of the things I thought, I want to have no hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yes. I think you're right. Yes, I think once bitten, twice shy. Yeah, okay. Although some things, they're useful at the time, but you develop, hopefully, and move on.
Yeah. It sounds a lovely way of just encouraging that kind of openness and listening and the recognition that actually none of us really know.
Yes, I mean, it did take sometimes, we had a rolling facilitator and some people took on that role well, everyone took on that role in different ways. There was always the temptation for it to go into a debate because that's so much the social norm.
Yeah.
But I did try to bring it back to not knowing. It was a lovely morning. It was a Sunday morning. So a lot of people came, and it was really nice for a lot of people, particularly living on their own, to have somewhere to go on a Sunday morning that wasn't church, and they'd meet like-minded people, and if it was a cafe, so we had lots of coffee and sometimes bacon rolls. It was just really, somebody compared it, which I didn't quite think was accurate. Somebody compared it to the 18th century cafes in the Scottish Enlightenment, because about the turn of the 18th century, well, it was 1603, the Union of the Crown, 1707, the Union of the Parliament. The parliaments of Scotland and England. So everyone went south. The whole court went south. Many thinkers went south. So anybody who was left in Edinburgh had to make their own society. Mm-hmm. And out of that came David Hume, who's a philosopher I really, really respect, and I loved reading him as well. And he had cafes. So we weren't quite at that level. They met in the new coffee shops, but we weren't quite at that intellectual level, I have to say. But it was very gratifying to be compared to that.
Beautiful. So when you became ill with cancer, it sounded like that really turned your life upside down. A lot of things changed for you. I guess a lot of your normal activities became impossible or difficult.
Yes, it's a shock. I mean, it's always a shock. I mean, they say when you hear the diagnosis that you don't hear anything else. And so I was determined that I was going to hear the rest of the conversation. And it sounded not too bad, but of course you never know, and you have to wait for biopsies, and you go and you have to live your life in not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing if you're going to have a few months of treatment and you're going to get better, or get your affairs in order. Yeah. So that fortnight, every day we went out, my husband and I, we walked locally around Edinburgh. And there was one day, it was a horrible, wet, soggy, grey day that you occasionally get these in Scotland. I don't know if you know that.
Yes.
But, and it was muddy and there was smur. It's that kind of rain that makes you really wet without you noticing that it's really raining. And so we were walking along this path, and suddenly I saw a kingfisher. I had never seen a kingfisher before. And it was such an exotic creature in this monochrome environment. I thought it was just so beautiful and turquoise and gold, and it just seemed like, I mean, it's just everything stopped at that moment. I thought, yes, all will be well. All manner of things will be well.
Yes.
I didn't mean that I was necessarily going to live, but I thought, well, whatever happens, it'll be well. Yeah.
So did you lose your fear of death in that moment?
Not entirely. Mm-hmm. I think I was anxious during the cancer treatment, but I was more anxious of having chemotherapy, which I didn't need. So no, I was anxious in the way, I was a little anxious. But when the GP phoned up to see how I was, I kept reassuring her that I was absolutely okay. And I said, I meditate and I have good support from friends. And I went to there's a sanctuary in the hospital called Maggie's Centre. It's a cancer care centre, and it's a holistic centre. And they don't do any treatment, but they deal with all the things around cancer that are not medical. Although they are nurses, so they understand what's going on, but they had a creative writing group there. And they did creative visualization. And there I found the love of poetry. The group, the creative writing group, was led by Valerie Gillis. She's a well-known Scottish poet, a very spiritual woman. She's a Christian, and spirituality comes into her work a lot, and nature. So this was like going into a warm bath every week. And she encouraged us to write the worst junk in the world, just to write. And that was very freeing.
You've been doing some writing before that, hadn't you? Is that right? Radio plays and things.
I did short stories. I was quite successful with short stories in the 1990s on Radio 4. One of them read by a young actor I'd not heard of called, gosh, I've forgotten his name. And he's very famous, but that doesn't matter. It might come back to me. And I wrote comedy.
Right.
But it's quite tough. It's a tough career. You need to have another job. Oh, Alan Cummings. It was Alan Cummings. I'd never heard of him. I mean, and he was great. I mean, he made the story so funny. And people wrote in and said, oh, it was about a 4-year-old and how a 4-year-old sees the world, which is very clear and questioning. So that was lovely, but I realized, I just have to go and get another job. This is all very well, but it won't bring home the bacon.
Yes. So it was a Maggie's Centre that you first started writing poetry, was it?
Yes.
In that group. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And then you went back to spirituality because you went to the direct path through a therapist that you knew, and I think you focused quite a lot on Rupert Spira's meditations, didn't you? The light of pure knowing and transparent body, luminous world. And I guess that's very different from what you were doing previously in the Advaita School or TM. But did that in any way link with your earlier discovery that we're not limited by the body? That feeling of borderlessness, did somehow it link together with that earlier experience when you were 19?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I went to the therapist because I had trouble picking up my own life. And I think it's now what Rupert and Francis would call a sense of lack. And also a loneliness. Although I had people around me, friends, I felt lonely. And the therapist said, well, that's because you're separated from yourself. So he said, let's just be quiet for a minute. And we sat together for quite a long time. And I thought, oh, yes, I've forgotten this. And he told me about Rupert. And it was very strange to go back to Advaita because I was done with that. I was done with spirituality. I thought, I'm not doing any of that anymore. So, but it has a tendency to pull you back. So there it was. And I laughed because I thought this is just something that is going to be here for the rest of my life. I can't be a normal person. What's known as a normal person in a materialist world. Can't do it. So I heard Rupert and thought, yeah, that's very interesting. A bit like the school, but not like the school. And then I found the meditations. I thought, wow. And it was called the yoga of sensation and perception.
Yes.
And I looked at the titles and they were really, they were intriguing. I remember one said, awareness is outrageously promiscuous. Well, these are not going to be boring. I thought, whatever these sessions are, they're not going to be boring. So my husband was playing bass guitar at the Edinburgh Fringe, and we have a garden room in our garden. And so I lay back very comfortably on a lounger chair and just put on the headphones and listen to these meditations. And wow, yes.
So
absolutely.
Sometimes people find with those yoga meditations that a lot of sort of buried feelings come to the surface in those. Did you encounter that or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would sometimes cry.
Mm.
I would shake. My whole body would shake, but that wasn't new. That had happened in meditation for a long time. I mean, there were certain things I knew happened in meditation. It would be a sort of woozy feeling, a loss of body sensation, going into dark, pleasant bliss, tears, and I would shake.
Yeah.
But I knew about the Quakers, so I wasn't particularly perturbed by that.
Yeah.
And but the key thing was, as you say, yes, coming to terms with, not coming to terms with, but welcoming feelings, welcoming emotions.
Yes.
Allowing them to be felt in the body. And even locating in them in the body, because emotions are so physical. Fear is so physical. It's often in feeling in the stomach or in the heart. Grief, yes, in the heart and the chest.
Yeah. And then in 2020, with all the COVID lockdowns, we all had this wonderful opportunity of daily satsangs with Francis Lucille, and you joined in that, didn't you?
Yes, well, as before, the first thing I was attracted to was the meditation.
Yeah.
Also, it was much shorter. It was an hour instead of 2 hours. So I thought, well, I'll dip my toe in. And I was sitting in my attic room. And, it's a sort of hippie phrase to say it blew me away, but it did. It was absolutely mind-blowing. It was so peaceful. Afterwards, I didn't want to move for about half an hour. I just thought, this is it. This is what I've looked for all my life. I've come home.
Mm.
It was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. What was it about those meditations, particularly that gave rise to that response in you?
Well, Francis always starts with the words something similar to allow everything in your experience to be exactly as it is. And in that is freedom, acceptance. And peace. That benevolent indifference to experience. And the voice that came in and out. I don't think I heard half of it. I think when I went back later, I realized I'd not heard most of it.
Yes.
And that's common. Sometimes I know people say you listen to a meditation several times so that you really hear what's being said. And every time it's different.
Yes. Well, once it's taken you to that place of peace beyond mind, then there's not really much point in listening to more of it, is it? You're there already, and it's the meditation's just there if you sort of fall out of that for a bit.
I mean, it's difficult to say, but something happened. Something happened that made me think, oh, this is it. This is the Dalai Lama speaking to me in Shangri-La. This is what I've looked for. I knew it. I knew it was there. I gave up. And just when I gave up the search, it came back and found me.
Yeah. So the meditations are very different from what you did before in the Advaita Vedanta school, in the sense that you're not trying to control the mind anymore. You're just allowing things to be as it is. I guess that was partly a factor in what attracted you to it, that kind of freedom, that you don't have to do anything.
Yes, I think it's such a common misperception. I hear it again and again that meditation is about stilling the mind, not having negative thoughts, and of course it is, but that's descriptive, not prescriptive. What I discovered even in the School of Philosophy is that happened anyway. We were supposed to listen to the mantra and come back to the mantra. But if you find something much nicer than that and much more peaceful, then you're going to go with that.
Sounds
not bothered about the
bit of a rebel.
I did rebel quite a lot. I mean, once you've dug the hole, you throw the trowel away, And that's probably not the best analogy, but
yes.
Yeah. Yes.
And Francis's teaching is unusual because of his emphasis on not knowing. So most spiritual teachings, they either tell you what to believe, or they tell you what they consider to be truth, and then try and guide you towards experiencing that for yourself, or believing that you've experienced it for yourself. But sometimes that can provoke a bit of a reaction against any kind of dogma. Was that something that you experienced, a sort of desire for freedom from that?
Yes, I mean, it goes back to Socrates. You can't know. I mean, Descartes as well. Just there's nothing, very little you can know for certain.
Yeah.
And for instance, if a spiritual teacher would start telling me what would happen after death, even as a theory, I would begin to tune out, because I think nobody knows that.
Yeah.
It has to be unknown, because nobody's died and come back. People have had near-death experiences, and they can say what happened right until the point that they had to come back, but nobody has actually died for any length of time and come back. So it can't be known. And I really like that about Francis. And it was on your book group, Jenny, that I had the first dialogue with Francis, and I was a bit nervous because, I still thought he was the big man, and it was about fear of death. So he took me through, well, what can be known. I knew that there's something rather than nothing. That's a given, and that I'm aware. So in the dialogue, he took me through the dialogue that said, well, how do you know this awareness has a beginning and an end? And I was going, And he said, no, I don't want to know what other people have told you. I don't even want to know if 99.9% of the population, I don't want to know what they think. I think, what say you, Anne? What say you? Do you know, without any doubt, that awareness has a beginning and an end? And I said, no, okay, no, I'll give you that. Yes. And so that dialogue continued, and that was perfect because it was exactly the way my father used to take me through any belief I had that he didn't agree with. He would take me through this Socratic dialogue, and at the end, I would have to admit I didn't know that. He was very good at dialogue. So there was a bit of my father in Francis that I really liked.
Yes.
And as well as be happy, I love that thing about be happy. You'll follow your heart's desire. Don't do practices. Don't get up at 7:30 or 5:30 every morning and sit with a straight back and do your meditation. Only do it if it's your heart's desire. If you'd rather read a book or go and dance or whatever, do that. And that is freedom.
Yeah.
And that means you come to everything with enthusiasm and joy, rather than when it's a prescribed practice, there's a sense of duty, and it's a bit of, as Francis would say, a party pooper. And I love that phrase, party pooper.
It's wonderful, isn't it? Yes.
Fear is anxiety is a party pooper. It sure is. Yes.
Yes. I mean, that love of freedom seems to be a theme throughout your life, doesn't it? I think it's sort of cropped up, and it's kind of been the motivator for changing direction each time you've changed direction. Seems to come from a love of freedom.
Yeah, I mean, I know this maybe sounds a bit like Mel Gibson in Braveheart shouting, freedom! But I think it is also a very Scottish thing, the desire for freedom. Yes. But we all desire that, don't we? We all want freedom.
I think so, but I think it's stronger and more on the surface in some people than in others. Some are very happy to accept a belief system and not to question. But I think you're very much into the questioning side of things. But you've worked in adult education and you've taught creative writing, and that's also about showing people their freedom, isn't it? Encouraging them to let go of the limits they impose on themselves.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the creative process is very much about that. And I used to prefer to teach subjects that didn't have a right and wrong answer. And I spent a lot of time with an organization called the Workers' Educational Association. So it provided training and, well, it was education. It was education, not training. We used to get a budget from employers for training, but we'd always put in a bit of education, and it was always about questioning. And these were people who had jobs like hospital cleaners and care home workers and healthcare assistants. And we'd get them to look at how to have a discussion, how to put together a presentation, how to structure your thoughts in an essay, a small essay, how to tell the difference between a fact and an opinion. But these people were profoundly intelligent. They'd gone their whole lives thinking they had been stupid, but they simply hadn't, a lot of them, been given the chances for one reason or another. And that was extremely fulfilling.
I can imagine. So beautiful, because once someone's open and questions, then that's a possibility for change, isn't it? That's a possibility for something new to come into their lives. And
yes, they would start to learn. There was one person who was very dyslexic, but a lot of dyslexia is anxiety and a poor educational experience and terror of learning anything. And he went on to do a college course. I saw him one-to-one. He was particularly anxious, and he did a sociology diploma. And I remember he wrote me a sentence, and I'm thinking, I don't even know what these words mean. but he obviously does, and that's something amazing to see that come out of people.
And you also write poetry. Where do your poems come from?
I don't know where they come from. They come from the same source as the meditation. That's all I can say.
Right.
And I think as Rachna Chawla has said, they arrive in your head like thoughts. And I imagine them, and it is just a metaphor. I imagine that there's poems or first lines of poems wandering around in the ether, and if somebody's receptive, they'll land, and Anne Hay's got her poetry book. She's got her page out. Oh well, I'll give her this line. But if I'm away doing, or if I'm having a dream, they'll go on and they'll go to Rachna or somebody else. That's a bit of a conceit, but that's how it feels that they arrive. I mean, you have to do a bit of craft, but
yes. They come from the universe. Yeah. So you sent me a number of poems, and I wonder whether you'd like to read one of them, one called Summer Out of Space. So I felt that really encapsulated that feeling of borderlessness. The body has no borders, which we've been talking about earlier. So would you like to read that one?
Yes, this I wrote this one in lockdown, and lockdown was, in the pandemic, there was, well, it's the pandemic still going on, but there was a lot of bad things about it, but there were bits of it I really enjoyed, the slowing down. And that feeling of boundarylessness of the body that I'd felt in meditation and on diamorphine in childbirth and other times was just there. This just arrived, and I'm thinking, this was really beautiful. It's something that's become very, not habitual, but very spontaneous. So, Summer Out of Space. When I jettison my mirror, bits of me vanish forehead, eyes, back. My nose is a flesh-coloured smudge, easiest seen with one eye closed. When I shut both, I float in space. Amorphous sensation, unsure of the boundary between me and other. I hear the wind, chaffinch, a strimmer, close and intimate as thought.
It's beautiful. I mean, not knowing is not just about not knowing facts or not knowing concepts, not having beliefs. There's also that not knowing in relation to the body. And you've had a very difficult time through your life with ill health. Looking back, has anything changed in your attitude towards the body?
Yes. Yes, I have a number of physical problems, and I sometimes have pain, as a lot of people do. At my age, I'll be 70 in about 6 weeks. So that doesn't come without some degree of deterioration of the body. But it's been quite interesting because these physical problems have made me look to body work, particularly, Feldenkrais and clinical somatics. And these work in a very similar way to make you aware of the body and at the same time to let it go. So I feel I know I'm more than this body. And the physical sensations are much less if you're relaxed, if you can almost welcome them. I mean, okay, you take painkillers, you get rid of pain any way you can, but if that's not possible, and it isn't always possible, then you welcome it. And it's interesting that once it's welcomed, sometimes it doesn't need to keep knocking at the door.
Yeah.
It's been seen and it'll go away.
I mean, one of the things that none of us know is when and how we're going to die. We know that the body will deteriorate and will continue to, as you've said, but we don't know when we're going to die. Are you afraid of that moment now? Or?
No. Well, I've come close to it twice. There was another time I have asthma, had a severe asthma attack, and twice I lost consciousness, and 3 times I came back. But my goodness, it was hard to come back because it was so peaceful. It was like, when you're really, really dog tired and it's the end of the day and you think, I can't wait to get into my bed, and your head hits the pillow and you think, oh, yes. It was like that. And obviously the process of dying might be unpleasant, but that's not happening just now, so I don't have to think about that.
Yes.
So, other people seem to have managed. My parents, my father used to make such a fuss about a cold, but he died of cancer with hardly a complaint. And something happened. Something happened to both of my parents before they died. They were they were at peace. It was palpable.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever seen somebody.
I've never seen.
It feels like passing
anyone
over. I mean,
die.
that doesn't feel like a euphemism anymore. It feels like somebody passed over to.
Yeah.
On. Yeah.
Yes. So, what is life like for you now? What does living in not knowing mean for you now in a practical sense?
It's very easy. I've lost a sense of duty. I mean, it's better to do things out of love than duty.
Yes.
I don't think I need to keep people happy. I'm quite happy to be myself. When I met Francis, I thought the phrase that came to mind was bien dans sa peau. Happy inside his own skin. And if somebody's happy inside their own skin, they're not trying to dominate anybody. They're not trying to take over the world or create bigger organizations or any. They're just happy, and it's palpable. And I had a conversation with him in Barcelona where we just laughed. And I thought, yes, life is easy. I mean, it's not. I mean, I'm not. There are difficulties. There were some real difficulties when I came back from Barcelona, but including getting quite a bad case of COVID, but no time was it terrible.
Yeah.
I suppose I think all things will be well, even if they're not. And I don't have drive. I'm bringing out a book of poetry, and it's somehow, once the poems are finished, I kind of lose interest. So I have to keep motivating myself to get this poetry book out, and people will keep reminding me, yes, you're supposed to be doing that. And I say, yes, I know. It will be done. But it will be done when this book is ready to be done. And there's no way I can get it done a minute before then. So there's a sense of things, a sense of a destiny that shapes my ends, rough hew it. Though I will, but believe me, I've tried a lot of rough hewing in my life. So, but it's best just to welcome whatever happens, I think. It makes life a lot easier.
So you found your Shangri-La, I guess.
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, well, you played a part in that, Jenny. I mean, your Zooms were absolutely brilliant at the beginning, because when I was first trying to think, where does this fit in? How does and because you knew the school and where I was coming from, you could say, well, you might be thinking this, but that might not be the case. And yeah, so that was really, really useful. Thank you very much for that. So many people along the way.
Yes.
And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for all of it. I don't regret any of it, actually. I don't regret all the mistakes. They were just, don't regret the prodigal daughter episodes or any of that. It's just,
yes.
It's all learning. Yeah.
Everything we needed happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's a perfect place to stop. Thank you, Anne. That's been a lovely conversation. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.